everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film the A is for Author book tag. This is an original tag created by Sean the Book Maniac, and I have been meaning to do this tag for ages and I haven't gotten around to it. So I thought it would be fun to answer all of these prompts using only nonfiction books in honor of Nonfiction November. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's just get to them, and I'll be looking down because I have the prompts written down on my bullet journal on my lap. All right, so number one is A is for Author, a good book by an author whose first or last name starts with the letter A. And for this one, I have chosen Svetlana Alexievich. This is her book, Voices from Chernobyl, that I just read recently a few months ago. It is an oral history of people who lived in the area of the great nuclear disaster and also of government employees who were sent in to clean up the mess. And I really, really loved it, and I'm looking forward to reading more books by this author. The next one is A is for A, the last book you read with the article or one-letter word A in the title. And this one I had to go back quite a distance to find a nonfiction book that I had read that had the article A in the title. And that was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, which I listened to on audiobook, and I highly recommend it on audiobook. It was fantastic. Question 3 is A is for Angry, a book that pissed you off. This is not a book that pissed me off because it was poorly written. This is a book that pissed me off because the content made me angry, and that's These Truths by Jill Lepore. I read this book earlier this year. It is a U.S. history nonfiction, basically tells the story of the United States from in the 1600s all the way to present day, and it tells the story from the perspective of a lot of minority groups that were taken advantage of in order to form this country. And it's very, very anger-inducing in parts, but great, fantastic, excellently written, a lot of stuff that you won't have learned in your high school history class. Highly, highly recommend that. Okay, question 4. A is for Awesome, a top read of recent years. I could talk about my top reads forever, so I decided just to pick the last book that was awesome that I finished, and that is a book I finished Friday night, and it's The Great Bridge by David McCullough. I've been talking about this book quite a bit this month during Nonfiction November. This is the history of the design and construction of the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. David McCullough is an excellent popular historical writer. He really can bring history to life and tell the story of these people that were involved in the construction of this bridge. It was amazing. It never lagged throughout. It was just straight on interesting for the entirety of this over 500-page nonfiction. I definitely loved it greatly. Okay, 5 is A is for Aaah, a book whose title includes at least 3 A's. And for that, I am choosing a book I don't know that I've talked about yet on this channel. This is Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year of Food Life, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 A's in the title, plus 1, 2, 3 A's in the author's first name, Barbara Kingsolver. You may have read some fiction by Barbara Kingsolver. She is very popular. This nonfiction account of her family's moving to a farm in the south of the United States and their attempt to live on food that they grew themselves and also food that was grown within their local community, I think within a 100-mile radius. I can't remember exactly what their, what area they drew from, but they tried to live eating as locally as possible for an entire year. And this is really, really awesome. If you are interested at all in sort of how to live lightly in the world, if you're interested in the local food movement or the slow food movement, if you're interested just in how to eat healthier or how to bring more connection to your family to the food that you eat. This is very good, and of course characteristically extremely well written because Barbara Kingsolver is amazing. Loved that book. Okay, question 6 is A is for Annoying, a character that drove you up the wall. Well, of course with nonfiction, we're not talking about characters, we're talking about real people. And for this one, I want to answer with a nonfiction that I no longer own because it annoyed me so greatly that I took the book out of my home. And that is Not That Kind of Girl by Lena Dunham. It is a memoir. It is sort of a millennial tale of this young woman who, you know, was trying to find herself and all of that, but it just was so, like, she was so much in her own head and so much making poor choices and so much talk about her sex life and her partying and all that. I just could not with that book. I found it extremely annoying. Question 7. A is for Ambivalent, a book you're still not sure how you feel about. And for that one, I am choosing another book that I read earlier this year. This is Ask Me About My Uterus, A Quest to Make Doctors Believe in Women's Pain by Abby Norman. I was really looking forward to reading this book because I had heard that it was about endometriosis and how women get treated by the medical establishment when they have sort of what's considered female problems. And part of this book is about that and is very, very interesting, but I went in thinking the entire book was about that, and it's really not. This is like sort of a memoir slash the author's experience with the medical establishment as she tries to figure out what is wrong with her. And so there's a lot more to it than just learning about endometriosis and how that, the history of that disease and how it's been diagnosed and treated in Western society. So if you read this, so that's why I guess I feel ambivalent about it, because it didn't give me all the information that I wanted. It didn't give me the experience that I wanted, but that's not to say that it was necessarily bad. There is a lot of what I call navel gazing in this book, which sometimes can be irritating to me. But even though the author is very young, she has been through a tremendous deal of trauma in her life already. So I think if you go into it with realistic expectations, you would probably find this interesting. And I would say it's not poorly written at all. It's well written. It's just, it's not solely about endometriosis. And then question 8, A is for Anticipation, a book, new release or not, that you're very much looking forward to reading. And so for that, I picked a book off my TBR shelf that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and that is Amity and Prosperity, One Family and the Fracturing of America by Eliza Griswold. This is a book that was, I think maybe won the National Book Award last year, but it's all about how the industrial practice of fracking impacted this one community in Pennsylvania on the edge of Appalachia. And I have really been intrigued by this book, really been looking forward to reading it, and for some reason it's just never gotten on my recent TBRs, and so I want to fix that pronto, and really am looking forward to getting into this book sooner rather than later. Okay, question 9. A is for Actually, a book you didn't expect to like but did. And for that one, I'm going back to the end of last year when I listened to Columbine by Dave Cullen, which of course is the very celebrated nonfiction account of the school shooting in Columbine in Colorado in 1999, I believe. So yeah, it was 20 years ago this year. And I really went into that book with a lot of trepidation. I had heard that it was an excellent nonfiction, but because of the subject matter, I really was not sure that I was going to like it. But Dave Cullen is just such an excellent storyteller. He really brought all of the information together in an excellent and very digestible way, even though it's a very traumatic event to be discussing in a nonfiction. I think that the way that he handled it made it very, you were able to take it in and not be completely overwhelmed by what you were reading about. It was really, really excellent. And because I enjoyed that book so much, I then, in 2019, listened to Parkland, which is his newest release that came out last winter, about the school shooting in Parkland, Florida. So he just is such an excellent sort of, it's narrative journalism, I would call it. And he really delves deep into a subject and tells the story from all sides. I think he does a really amazing job. Question 10 is, A is for affected, a character, book, or writer you feel is pretentious. So this one was tough because generally if I find a nonfiction book pretentious, I just DNF it. I just bail on it and don't read it. But there was a book that I listened to last year called Unnatural Causes by Barbara Enrick. Now, I had read way back, probably 20 years ago, her book Nickeled and Dimed, which is sort of a classic nonfiction about economic issues and sort of people who live on the poverty line in the United States. And she went not undercover, but she worked in different minimum wage jobs in order to understand how people on the poverty line lived in nickel and dime, and that was an excellent piece of nonfiction writing. So when in this book, Unnatural Causes, it happened to be available to me through my library's online catalog, so I listened to it on audio. I ended up listening to the whole thing, and this one's more about medicine and how Western healthcare systems treat medical ailments, and sort of the underlying culture around medical treatments in Western cultures, particularly the United States. And I just didn't like it. I found the tone of it to be really not wasn't I couldn't find a lot of empathy in it. I couldn't find a lot of areas to connect with it. I thought it was written from a point of view of somebody of privilege without acknowledging that privilege. So I just found it to be pretentious and kind of irritating, and I didn't really like it very much. And also, it was boring. So that is never a good combination of things. Okay, question 11 is, A is for, how's it going, A? A book you like by a Canadian writer or one you want to read. So for this one, I am cheating just a bit because I really want to include this book in my lineup here, and that is The Inconvenient Indian, A Curious Account of Native People in North America, and the author is Thomas King, who is Indigenous himself. He was born in California, but he has lived as an adult in a lot of his adult life. He's lived in Canada. So he actually, I think, I can't remember exactly, Alberta maybe. But anyway, he lived in Canada, and he writes a lot about Indigenous issues from a Canadian perspective. So this book is all about North American Indigenous peoples in general, both Canada and US, and it's really written with a lot of humor. If you like your humor with a touch of sarcasm, I very much recommend this book if you want to learn more about what the history of how Native American people have been treated since colonization by Europeans. I first heard about this book from Mercedes on Mercy's Bookish Musings, and she did not steer me wrong. You can see from the tabs that are still existing in this book, I got a lot out of this. I learned a lot, and I really did like the authorial style of this book. Okay, question 12. A is for Anticlimactic, a book you thought fizzled out at the end. And this book kind of represents a whole genre for me in nonfiction books that very often fizzle out for me by the end. And this is specifically Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling. And she is an actress in the United States, and this is her sort of humorous memoir about, herself and like her anxieties and how she deals with her job and her family and all that sort of thing. And like very many celebrity memoirs, they can just get tiresome by the end. They just fizzle out, and you're just like, I don't know. It was funny for a while, but then by the end, I was just like, I don't really care anymore. And I find that happens a lot with celebrity memoirs. So unfortunately, this one was not a book that held my attention throughout. I did finish it, and it was fine, but it wasn't fabulous. So those are my answers to the A is for Author book tag. I want to thank Sean for creating the tag. I think it's a lot of fun. I am not going to tag anybody in particular because a lot of people have already done this tag. We're already on, we're several letters later into our alphabet soup of tags from Sean. But I will say, if you can find a way if you think, oh, well, a lot of people have done this tag and I don't, what do I have to add to it? I think it's fun to come at some of these tags from a specific angle, like I did here with nonfiction. If you can find a whole bunch of books in the same sort of category or genre to answer the questions, I find that quite fun to do. So I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found some new nonfiction books that you might like to try here in Nonfiction November, and I will talk to you later.